pipeline in Druzhba is reopened on one side, and on the other side, Orban unblocks the 90 billions as he was agreeing with it and allowing it, even not agreeing, but allowing it, I think it is possible. So my call is for both to be flexible. But at the end of the day, we need those money for Ukraine, and we want to unblock them, and we want to respect the decisions that we took.
The European Union is currently navigating a period of intense political, economic, and strategic transition. And Italy, under Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, has become one of the most closely observed actors in this evolving landscape. What makes this moment particularly significant is not a single crisis or event, but the accumulation of pressures that are reshaping how the EU functions internally and how its member states position themselves within the Union. Italy's role is central in this shift because it sits at the intersection of migration routes, economic debates, energy corridors, and ideological differences about the future direction of Europe. Across the continent, the European Union continues to present itself as a unified political and economic bloc, but the reality is more complex. Member states are increasingly driven by domestic political pressures that influence their stance in Brussels. While the core institutions of the EU continue to push for integration, coordination, and common policy frameworks, national governments often prioritize internal stability and voter sentiment. This tension is not new, but it has become more visible in recent years, due to overlapping global crises, including inflation, energy disruptions, migration flows, and geopolitical instability. Italy's government under Giorgia Meloni has positioned itself as both cooperative and assertive within this system. On one hand, Italy remains fully engaged in EU institutions and supports the fundamental structure of European cooperation. On the other hand, the government has consistently emphasized national sovereignty, border control, and stricter management of migration policy. This dual approach has defined Italy's current diplomatic posture. Rather than challenging the EU directly, Meloni's administration often seeks to reshape policy from within, negotiating more favourable terms for Italy while maintaining overall alignment with European frameworks. One of the most persistent issues shaping Italy's relationship with the EU is migration across the Mediterranean. Italy's geographic position makes it a primary entry point for migrants arriving from North Africa and beyond. This has placed continuous pressure on Italian coastal regions, reception centres, and administrative systems. Over time, migration has become not only a humanitarian and logistical challenge, but also a deeply political issue within Italy and across Europe. Public debate within Italy frequently focuses on border security, integration capacity, and the distribution of responsibility among EU member states. The European Union has attempted to address migration through various agreements, including relocation mechanisms, external partnerships with transit countries, and funding for border management. However, implementation has been uneven, and disagreements among member states persist. Countries on the front lines, such as Italy, Greece, and Spain, often argue that the burden is disproportionately placed on them. Meanwhile, some northern and eastern European states have resisted mandatory relocation schemes, preferring national control over migration policy. This divergence has made it difficult for the EU to establish a fully unified migration system. Meloni's government has taken a more structured and controlled approach to migration management. Italy has strengthened cooperation with countries in North Africa to reduce irregular departures and has supported initiatives aimed at disrupting human trafficking networks. At the same time, Italy has continued to call for stronger European solidarity, arguing that migration is not a national issue alone but a continental responsibility. This reflects a broader contradiction within EU politics. While migration is recognized as a shared challenge, the political willingness to share responsibility remains uneven. Beyond migration, economic policy remains another major area of discussion between Italy and the European Union. The Eurozone continues to face structural challenges, including high public debt levels in several member states, uneven economic growth, and ongoing inflationary pressures that have affected household incomes and business stability. The European Central Bank has taken steps to manage inflation, but monetary policy alone cannot resolve underlying fiscal and productivity differences across the bloc. Italy in particular faces a complex fiscal situation. With one of the highest public debt ratios in Europe, the country must carefully balance growth-oriented policies with fiscal discipline requirements set by EU frameworks. The Meloni government has advocated for more flexibility in European fiscal rules, especially to allow for investment in infrastructure, energy transition, and industrial modernization. At the same time, EU institutions continue to emphasize long-term debt sustainability and budgetary discipline across all member states to ensure financial stability within the Eurozone. This creates an ongoing negotiation between Rome and Brussels. Italy seeks space to stimulate economic growth and address domestic needs, while the EU seeks to maintain consistent financial rules to prevent systemic risks. The outcome is often a compromise that reflects both political realities and economic constraints. This pattern has become increasingly common across the European Union, where rigid policy frameworks are continuously adjusted to accommodate national circumstances. Energy policy has also emerged as a defining issue in recent EU politics. Following global disruptions in energy markets, European countries have been forced to reconsider their dependence on external suppliers and accelerate investment in alternative energy sources. Italy has positioned itself strategically in this transition by expanding partnerships with countries in North Africa and the Mediterranean region. These agreements focus on natural gas supply diversification as well as renewable energy development, including solar and wind projects. At the European level, energy security has become closely linked to geopolitical strategy. The EU has prioritized reducing dependency on single external sources and increasing internal resilience. This has led to increased investment in renewable infrastructure, cross-border energy networks, and joint procurement mechanisms. Italy's geographic location makes it a key transit hub in these efforts, connecting European energy demand with supply routes from the southern Mediterranean region. Foreign policy alignment within the EU has been relatively strong in certain areas, particularly regarding geopolitical conflicts that affect European security. Member states, including Italy, have largely maintained coordinated positions on sanctions, humanitarian support, and diplomatic engagement in response to major international crises. This unity has reinforced the EU's role as a collective geopolitical actor, even as internal differences remain on other policy issues. However, the broader question of European identity and political direction continues to evolve. The rise of conservative and right-leaning governments in several member states has introduced new dynamics into EU decision-making. These governments often emphasize national identity, border control, and sovereignty while still operating within the EU institutional framework. This represents a shift from earlier periods of European integration, where the dominant political direction leaned more clearly toward deeper federalism. Giorgia Meloni's leadership is often viewed within this context. Her political approach reflects a broader European trend where governments are not rejecting the EU outright, but are instead seeking to redefine its balance of power between Brussels and national capitals. This creates a more complex political environment where cooperation and negotiation are constant and where policy outcomes are increasingly shaped by coalition building among diverse ideological positions. Inside Italy, domestic politics continues to influence foreign policy decisions. Public concerns about cost of living, employment, taxation, and social services remain central to political debate. Migration policy also remains highly sensitive, influencing electoral dynamics and public opinion. The government must therefore continuously balance European commitments with domestic expectations, ensuring that EU-level agreements remain politically sustainable within Italy. At the same time, the European Union itself is undergoing institutional reflection. Questions about enlargement, decision-making efficiency, and budget allocation are becoming more prominent. Potential future expansion into parts of the Western Balkans and Eastern Europe raises both strategic opportunities and structural challenges. Enlargement would increase the EU's geopolitical reach, but also require adjustments to institutional frameworks and financial systems. Technological competition is another growing focus area. The global race in artificial intelligence, digital infrastructure, and advanced manufacturing has prompted the EU to develop more coordinated industrial strategies. Italy, with its strong manufacturing base and industrial tradition, is positioned to benefit from these initiatives if it can successfully integrate into broader European innovation networks. Despite all these challenges, the European Union continues to function through a process of negotiation and compromise. Decisions are rarely straightforward, and policy outcomes often reflect a balance of competing interests rather than a single unified vision. Italy under Giorgia Meloni is an example of this dynamic in practice, operating both as a national government with distinct priorities and as a participant in a shared European system. What emerges from the current situation is not a crisis of existence for the European Union, but a period of adjustment.